Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on?
Oh, I'm just feeling like I got some things that I've had on my mind for a while. I'm ready to get innovative.
Me too.
Not really sure how to go about
Got
doing
problems to solve.
Yeah. I mean, actually, today we're going to talk about innovation. And I think that
I want to get to Mars.
requires some innovation.
Yeah.
You might have a little competition. You might be a little behind on those innovations, but
Can we just go to Pluto instead?
yeah, is that even a planet anymore?
I don't know.
I
It's a place.
I tell you what, that you talk about that and we could get off track in a hurry. But before we attempt to get off track, I should mention that today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io. We can help you build a software development team quickly and affordably. They can help you
Innovate.
innovate.
Yes.
Yeah. So now innovation is an interesting topic. I think that it's difficult to pinpoint. Like when you hear the word innovation, what comes through? What's first in your mind?
I mean, sometimes they're big ideas and sometimes they're just small incremental improvements, it's across the spectrum.
I think it starts. I think an adjacent word that comes up is creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, innovation is a form of creativity. I think anytime you innovate something, a level of creativity exists. With that the innovative juices are sometimes difficult to get flowing.
Well, and some people are naturally just very innovative. Like they are always kind of problem solvers and big thinkers and whatever. And then some people just flat out aren't and never will be.
Right.
It's just, some of it's just a personality quirk.
Yeah, sure. And I do think it stems from a level of creativity.
Yeah, definitely.
And some people are a lot more rigid. And like you mentioned, the whole process of innovation isn't as intuitive to them. I consider myself to be an innovator. But with that, sometimes can struggle as to when and how to turn that switch on.
It's also some people that they're not rule followers. What's the best way to describe that?
Well, that might be me.
Because like take electric cars, for example, right? I mean, forever we could sit around and be like, oh no, this is how we make cars. This is how we do it. We don't do it another way. And then finally somebody has to come along and be like, screw that shit. We're doing it a different way.
Yeah, I agree.
And sometimes that's where the innovation comes from, right? Somebody's got to be bold enough to like go way out there and be like, no, we're not going to do things because that's the way we've always done it.
Well, we've always said that a good startup or software or anything comes with a strong desire to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And make it, and that with that, that's making some kind of change. There's obviously, if you look back at the entire human history, innovation is key along the way. You went from living in caves to stone tools to the Bronze Age to all of it,
to flying 8,000 miles across the planet in one day.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I've done a few times.
And yes, you have. And then flying to space.
Yeah.
Maybe other planets.
We're going to the moon.
You just talk about just general innovation and the speed at which you can produce something that's usable. Is that we're definitely in. Well, one of the things that's been a hot topic is like, some of the virus that's been in China.
Yeah.
And I read an article that said that scientists had pinpointed the part of the basically the DNA or whatever that they could begin to create a vaccine.
Open source the DNA.
I know. I'm sitting here thinking
coronavirus, within a week.
And that's what innovation is beautiful when it's in place, can do some really impactful things.
You get the coronavirus from drinking Corona beer.
Yeah, I had that after your engagement party.
And after the Super Bowl?
No, I take it pretty easy. I did shoot off a lot of fireworks in my driveway, though. I had some leftovers.
You're
from
one of
4th
those
July.
guys.
Dude, my whole neighborhood felt like the 4th of July.
So how do we be more innovative, though?
Well, I think let's first start with a few statistics on innovation. Now, really any business is always looking for people that have fresh ideas and people that, especially when it comes to software or product. One interesting statistic is that 63% of customers like it when companies offer new products.
Absolutely. We always want the latest and greatest.
Yeah. So now at the same time, sometimes people try to innovate things. They try to over innovate.
Thank you, Apple.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a good point.
We don't need a new iPhone. We need a longer battery. Take
Right.
all the other shit away.
Sure. And I'm still using the same iPhone I had 2 years ago. It still does great. And, maybe I'll take a picture.
That's the problem with phones today, though, realistically.
I'm actually
right?
going to use my...
They keep adding, like, the big innovation this year is foldable screens. We have phones that fold.
I'm going to take a picture of you for
a better battery.
The @Startup Hustle podcast Instagram, which is not powered by batteries.
No.
It's powered by magic. Which is a real source of energy for many. You talk about innovation. I mean, some of it does feel a little magical at some days. Now, you say how to be more innovative. That's a tough question, and it's actually something I've explored with a lot of different people. Maybe not as much with the term innovation, but how do you turn on inspiration?
Well, and some of it's company culture, right? If we're talking about companies that are innovative and how they become more innovative, it has to be part of the culture and the DNA of the company. And some companies actually have a chief innovation officer,
right.
Like Black and Veatch here in Kansas City has one, and they're kind of very famous for that. And I don't know if you went with me one day, but I went to it was like kind of like a community event session thing, and they actually talked all about how they do innovation and whatever, and it was like very intriguing.
No, I wasn't with you,
but
thanks for the invite.
Yeah, sorry. And
some of that starts with just not rejecting crazy ideas.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if crazy is the right word to throw in there, but you have to have an open mind to making things different.
Well, part of the problem with companies, and like I have this problem at Stackify, is like we have 1,000 ideas, but then we have like 50 ideas we should have already done. We just can't even execute on and get that shit done. We can't get it out of the way.
And we've talked about, I think that's a common situation. We've talked about that at Full Scale, that we often have A+ ideas with C- execution. Yeah. And, some of that, it's difficult to push change and innovation in a forward way that creates something meaningful. And sometimes your attempt to innovate or do things differently can sidetrack your core objective. So that's always the important question to ask, is where on the priority scale does some of this come in? Now, I think let's broaden the focus here. And as far as how to be more innovative, creative, or inspired, that is a very challenging question. It's also something that I've engaged in some long-term intellectual conversations with a few people over the years, mainly musicians. And I actually have a YouTube video.
Musicians can be innovative.
Well, the thing is they have to. All right. So the thing that I find interesting is, obviously, as a musician, you're creative, oftentimes innovative, and then you have to flip that switch on at an exact time in front of thousands of people. And
it's like being a podcast host.
Yeah, totally. The pressure's really on here. But with that, certain types of music aren't just like so my fascination is with musicians that have to be highly improvisational, meaning they're not just playing the same 4-minute and 2-second song that's exactly 4 minutes and 2 seconds every time. So my conversation first started 3 years ago with Jake Sininger, the guitarist in Humphreys McGee, who is just ridiculously good at what he does. And some of the things that came out of that we've had an ongoing conversation every time we see each other and we're in the same town. We put an hour or two aside and just talk about this. So my questions, for some of them have even been like trying to discussing what makes you a genius and what makes you crazy. But in regards to innovation, one of the things that he's real adamant about is you have to keep your mind in a place that's close to innovation.
Right.
So for him, it's just continuing to play and play and play. So when it comes time to flip that switch, you're right next to it. Right. You're not across the room from it.
Right.
And one of the things that I found most impressive about some of this is he looks at playing guitar the same way that a software engineer looks at creating a solution. There's a 0 and a 1 to it. And music is very patternistic in that way. A note is in the same key as another note, and if you're out of that, doesn't sound right.
Right.
So now having to do that at a ridiculous amount of speed, and he'll tell you the moment I think about it is the moment I mess up.
Right. Yeah. It's got to be muscle memory.
So, but that's the thing that's crazy. So for me, when I feel inspiration or innovative, I have a difficult time just turning that on.
Right.
That's why I'm so fascinated with Jake's ability to do that at any moment in front of 5,000 people.
Sure.
For me, when I feel I can feel the innovation coming on because I start to feel very focused, and I feel like I start viewing things in a forward state of mind. Not like, hey, this is where this is at. I start thinking about where things could be.
Right.
And then the question is how far down the timeline do you have a sense of clarity with that? So for me personally, when it comes to being more innovative, it all involves identifying the times that I might feel inspired or have some clarity, which is tough to find.
Which can be really hard. And so this is one of the
it's a noisy
challenges
world. It's a noisy
of
world.
being a startup, right? Where, I'm the CEO of Stackify, and I could be very product focused, very innovative. But when I spend all of my day in meetings dealing with bullshit, HR problems, trying to raise capital, dealing with business partners, just dumb shit, it's really difficult to all of a sudden be very innovative.
Well, because you have moved your mind away from a place that is adjacent to the innovation and inspiration. And that's the similar thing that Jake was talking about. And so some of the things that might help with that is beginning to surround yourself with creative and innovative people.
Well, or just having the right team, right? So you can delegate certain tasks. It's like, it's my job today to focus on this and leave me alone. I'm in this mode.
Right. But once again, hard to do.
Yeah.
By the way, to do that, I turn off all my notifications. I put my phone on vibrate. Sometimes I put my phone like on a whole different level of my home or different places, like where it can't be a distraction. Because the moment a push notification comes or an email dings or something buzzes in your pocket, it's a distraction.
Yep.
Yeah. And I openly am an ADHD guy. Mm-hmm. Which can be a powerful ally or a powerful distraction.
Right.
I think another thing that's important is, we mentioned not rejecting ideas, but you also have to embrace fear. And with that, people fear change. So innovation is change. It's improvement. It's evolution in many senses of the word. And the important part to remember is, you're going to fail when it comes to innovation.
Failure is always an option, and it's part of the process.
Yeah, it's one step closer to getting the innovation where you need. And by the way,
insert quote about Thomas Edison.
And yeah, it was funny. I was just thinking the exact same reference. Yeah. And the thing is pay attention to that failure along the way, because you're collecting a lot of important information about it, maybe about something else. So, all right. So we'll take a little sidebar here. All right. So Matt, you've been successful as an entrepreneur. Vin Solutions was obviously a hit. Stackify is, on the way to the moon, baby, to the moon. And so at some point in either one of those, can you look back and specifically remember like the moment when you're like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to focus my shit on?
Well, I think there's definitely moments where you have kind of key innovations, like we invented this thing, we came up with this product idea,
or even just decided the course of action.
Yeah, we bet on this idea and we doubled down on it, and it either worked or it didn't.
Sure. Like I specifically remember the day that, okay, so we'll look back, and this was technically pre-full scale. But do you remember me when I had been tinkering with all of the different business plans and models that might be able to allow us to be partners and let us expand in Cebu? It was February 15th, 2 years ago. I remember all the way. I remember it down to the date. Yeah. And with that, it came from, and to give you some insight, I had probably done 10 to 12 different models of the projections, and I just couldn't, and it up until the one that finally hit, it just didn't make sense. There was something missing. It would require too much capital. It didn't make sense. And then the moment that it made sense, it was like, oh, wow. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was literally like turning on your windshield wipers when your windshield's covered with fog or steam, and they're like, I can see. And I remember at that moment, I knew that I had something that worked. Mm-hmm. Now, if I hadn't kept tinkering with it, and looking at it, or if I had just accepted as something else that you can't put square pegs in round holes.
Well, and it wasn't much past that when
Yeah.
you're like, hey, Matt, I don't think I'm going to work on this part of our business anymore.
Yeah, that was 3 months later.
Yeah.
And that was continued. So, and that's actually a great example, Matt, because, we had decided a specific path for, a partnership that we had created, and we had talked about some of the things that Full Scale did. And we had pretty much decided, we're saying, you know what, this is something we need to re-explore later. We need to get really good at doing the things for the businesses that are right in front of us. And it was input and just comments from other people that made us realize maybe we should try this, started playing with it a little more. And it didn't take long to figure out that something needed to change. We didn't exactly reinvent the process. Well, we did in some ways very much improve the process of how businesses find and use remote developers. But the basic concept of it, I mean, dude, there's a lot of people that do what we do.
Yep. There's a lot of people.
But with that, we felt that there were many broken parts of it, and we could use our own.
We could do it better.
Yeah.
We could innovate.
And we did.
Yep.
And we did, all the way down to the way we assess different people's skills. And it's all about trying to find the right match, not just trying to find people to sit in seats. And that seemed to be, and other things too. I'll give you an example. So at Full Scale, we help companies find software developers and build teams in our office in the Philippines. And one of the things that we felt was broken about and still is about the most common model of this is making you talk to one person and not giving you access to all the people on your team. Like, there's no value there. It slows shit down.
Well, and I think it's also important to think about when we talk about innovation, sometimes your product isn't necessarily unique or that novel or that different, but how you sell it could be the key innovation.
Well, that was something else.
The go-to-market strategy could be, think about the products you buy today from ads you see or Facebook or Amazon, and even a lot of things about Amazon, like buying half the shit we buy on Amazon, none of it is innovative. What's innovative is I can buy it, I can push one button, and I know for sure the shit's going to show up in 2 days. Yep. Where you go back a few years ago, I hated buying online because you don't really know if they have the product in stock. You don't know if it's in back order. You don't know if you're really going to get it. So a lot of the innovation there wasn't the product.
You don't necessarily trust the brand in every situation.
So a lot of times the innovations aren't necessarily the product. It can be the business model itself. It can be the go-to-market strategy, all of those things.
People, process, or product.
Like
those are the things that you can build innovation around. And those 3 Ps are, you did not probably hear that here first.
Yeah.
But those are really the things. So when it comes to innovation involving people, that process usually goes hand in hand with that. And
innovation comes in a lot of forms.
Yeah, sure. And I think really that what Matt's, hinting at here is you don't have to create something that is entirely new.
Right.
You can
be a different go-to-market strategy.
There are probably an unlimited, well, they're not probably, there are an unlimited infinite amount of innovative ideas. And some of those, some of those might even just be for your personal life. And you can innovate different things and just
a great example of this are things like Airbnb.
Oh yeah.
Like renting a apartment or a house, there's absolutely nothing innovative about that. It's been going on for as long as history. But the ability to go online and quickly find all of these places available.
Well, Uber's a similar thing.
Yeah,
like
Uber
you look at
too.
Uber, Uber's just a modern take on the taxi.
It's not really that different.
But why was it so innovative? Dude, if you are old enough like I am to remember what it was like in some cases trying to catch a cab.
Yeah.
Or you'd have to call, they'd show up like an hour later.
And some people don't appreciate this. Like if you live in New York, the ability to catch a cab is
easy.
Totally different than Kansas City.
It would have been a total process.
Totally different.
Where I live.
Yeah.
I live in the suburbs. Cabs never drive by my house. And I would have to call them. They would take a long time to get there. It was more expensive. It was not convenient. And, now with that, the innovation of something like Uber or Lyft or whatever made it pretty easy. And here's the thing. You mentioned Amazon earlier. I have confidence in their innovation to be a fallback for me. I can pretty much get picked up wherever it is I need to get picked up. And I feel comfortable about that. So I could potentially, and this is just kind of a goofy example, I could go to a full-scale sweet and greet event.
Yeah.
I drove my car there, but then I was there with you and we're having a good time and we had a couple too many drinks.
We had a few extra
I know
Coronas.
that with a push of a we had with a push of a button, I can get us home safely. Which, by the way, sometimes the inconvenience of not being able to catch a cab could then have resulted in us making bad decisions, like, oh, maybe I'll just drive.
Well, and it's no doubt that's an example of something that's probably been a boom for bars and stuff like that, right? Because people are more likely to know, like, hey, I know I can get a ride home. Yeah,
I think in general. Okay, so now back to how to be more innovative. I think you got to be knowledgeable. You have to, you got
to understand the industry.
I'm going to go back to
got to understand the problem.
I'm going to go back to Jake as an example. Okay. So Jake is the most knowledgeable musician that I know, I think. And I know a lot of musicians. So, and if you ask him, you say, how many guitar chords are there? And he's like 7,337. How many do you know? Well, I know all of them. But that's the thing is if you want to be masterful or innovative, that the ability to do so becomes easier and much more within your grasp with the masterful knowledge of the subject matter. Like you go back to the Edison example, like if he didn't know anything about electricity, how was he going to try to make a light bulb? And just saying, if you don't know anything about software as a coder, you're probably going to have a difficult time writing code,
right?
Because you don't have any, so the more knowledgeable you are, it helps you understand the potential solutions. And I think what it really does is it helps you empathize with what the pain points are for the innovation you're trying to create.
Well, and so part of the challenge we have is you have people that are very innovative, but they don't know how to actually create the actual technical innovation, right?
Yeah.
And this is where a company like Full Scale comes in.
Sure.
You have people that are like, oh, I understand the legal industry or the pet insurance or whatever it is, but I need to create software, but I don't know how to create the software. I always refer to it as like the Winklevosses and Zuckerberg.
Sure.
Right? Like the Winklevosses may have had the idea, but it took Zuckerberg to actually execute it.
Right.
And you got to have the pairing of these people. And that's where companies like Full Scale come in, right?
Sure.
We can come in and help people realize whatever that innovation is and actually
and there's
engineer it.
There's companies in any industry. It's not just software. Like there's companies that'll help you build prototypes. They'll help you patent things, do a whole lot of different stuff, which by the way, we're in a golden age for that too. You can fire up a 3D printer and make specific things that, you talk about the ability to innovate. Like a 3D printer is something that changed the ability to innovate a trip to the moon or a trip to Mars. Well, here's the thing: is rather than needing to bring along a gazillion parts, you bring that instead, which can make whatever you need, however you need it.
Just need the raw materials.
That's it. Yeah. And that's an example of where innovation can create a hell of a lot of other innovation. Right. Some of the things as well that I think are kind of cool, like you talk about like the Arduino or the Raspberry Pi.
Yes.
Those are, and why don't you explain those a little?
I mean, they're basically low power, very simple computers. I mean, we've gotten to the point where a computer, and we talk about a computer like the basic like processor, graphics card, networking, connectivity to things like Bluetooth, wireless, all these types of sensors or chips that you would need are such mass produced and small now that you can make a circuit board that's very small, like probably twice the size of a credit card or so, that can house all of that stuff.
Then you can.
They're not super powerful.
Well, you can program it. Then
they're not super powerful, but then you can use that to build like different home automation things, or people use them to make like you can even run like old video games on them, like old arcade games and stuff. Like there's kits to do that with your kid, so you can make these. And I think we had some people on the podcast for like, didn't we have one?
There was the heat, the cold from heat.
Yeah,
heat from cold.
They were using these types of boards.
Yeah,
and I've talked to other people that had like a thermometer in barbecue, like, and all they needed was a simple enough computer to collect the temperature of barbecue that's cooking and report back, over Wi-Fi or a cell phone, antenna basically to some other database somewhere else to report, right? And so now, these things cost like $30 or something.
Right.
And so now for $30,
Where 20 years ago, that
you have a
wasn't
whole
even
computer
there.
in your hands.
Well, if you
which
look
is awesome.
well, actually, it was kind of there, but maybe not as flexible. If you look at like the whole Apple story, I mean, that's basically like Jobs and Wozniak went to the kit computer store, which
Right.
was like not even like a thing. It was like just like a niche hobby, and they pieced together a bunch of shit. And next
I need
thing
a sound
you know,
card, I need a graphics card,
sure.
I need the processor, I need the memory, I need this, and you put it all together. I used to do that.
Yeah. So, well, the
25 years ago.
the accessibility of that stuff is at an all-time high,
Yeah.
and is going to continue to get cheaper. It's going to continue to be more accessible. It's easier to find online, and now all of a sudden,
Now think about like the Apple Watch on your wrist is probably way more powerful than any of that stuff. Plus
sure.
It tracks your heartbeat, and all sorts of stuff. It's like
it was Brett Blackman who was here at maybe like episode 15, talking about the potential to integrate that kind of wearable data into blockchain and like do a whole lot of different stuff. And so my dad has had heart issues throughout his life, and he's got a defibrillator / data collection tool that's basically in his shoulder.
Wow.
Now, but the thing is like future wearables won't even require that kind of stuff. And when Brett was here, we were talking about the majority of damage from a heart attack occurs in a range that could be preventable. Like the information and the signals exist within our within the human body a couple weeks before, or maybe even a month before that occurs, and you could take preventative measures. But when you get to the point where you're actually having a heart attack, now the damage is occurring,
right.
and in fact they're in a rush to save your life.
Right.
So some of that data, like you look at the future accessibility. Now, one thing when it comes to innovation, I want to talk about forward thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned this a little earlier. So the great inventors and innovators of the world, and one of them who's pretty mainstream now is Kurzweil. Now, Ray Kurzweil, and he's an outspoken person on singularity, which is the bonding between man and machine.
Okay.
He's a very well-known inventor, and you can find some cool documentaries about him on Netflix. Now, I first became familiar with Kurzweil because there was a line of Kurzweil digital pianos, and when I worked for Roland, they were like an opposing brand. And that was an innovation. So he grew up in a music family, and that obviously became something he was interested in. Now he does a lot more crazier stuff, but he'll tell you that the great inventors of the world are working on what they want to innovate and build in 10 years.
Right.
So that, and those innovations begin early, and they're using things like Moore's law and predictive analysis to understand, okay, I might not be able to do this now, but I can think all of this through. So when the moment this stuff is available, meaning like, and that could be processing power. It could be, you mentioned the phone and the battery. Being able to make a battery last 10 times longer has like a gazillion implications that could change a zillion different things. Like the thing that's plugged into my dad's shoulder, it's got a battery in it. And they've had to change that a couple times in his lifetime, which requires it's a somewhat invasive surgery.
Wow.
And, just you look at little things like that and the impact they can have. So when you think about innovation, there's things you can change now. And then you got to think about things that are going forward. Like when I look at Full Scale, I try to think about, here we have a company that in less than 2 years, you got 200 employees. And that requires forward thinking too. These are levels of innovation. Like it was over a year ago when we realized, oh man, this is growing really quickly. We started building our own management platform for it. And at times like that was a real challenge because building software is hard. But now that we've built it and are continuing to maintain it, we have created a pretty cool innovation that not our employees benefit from, our clients are able to use to like search for people to help them innovate and stuff like that. Now that required a little bit of we had to take a little bit of a
big
flyer.
investment. R&D, investment, time,
we made a pretty significant investment. Honestly, considering how much we've invested in some other businesses, we've easily invested way more in our own. Now, with that, we suddenly have something that if we want to open in other cities, acquire other businesses, and we've had a lot of feedback from our own employees that are like, are we innovating this to be a consumer-facing product? because there's a lot of, we mentioned earlier, there are other businesses that are similar to ours. So who knows?
Yep.
But I mean, that innovation was created. Well, most of the innovations that I've created that I'm proud of in the past were meant to solve problems just right there in our own office, not necessarily even a consumer grade thing. My very first innovation was what I called the APC, the automatic page creator, which was what led me to hiring people in the Philippines.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I was trying to build self-generating websites that created new pages based on changes in database tables.
A lot of dynamic content.
Which today is not high technology. 10 years ago, that was hella innovative. And I did really well with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I was trying to do that now, it'd be a yawner. But there wasn't anything out there to help me do that. So we had to build it on our own.
Yep.
What's something that you look back at that you innovated that you're like, I don't know, where can you put a check mark in the clever box?
So at Stackify, we have a free tool that we built called Prefix, and
used by thousands of people worldwide.
Yeah, and it's completely free. It's a type of software performance profiler that tells developers how their code is performing, what their code does, and it's downloaded by like thousands of people every month.
Yeah.
And we originally built it. Man, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now, as a way to be like a lead generator, a free tool. So, people would download it and they like it. And actually one of the potentially biggest customers we have that we're talking to right now, actually, that's how they came to us.
Yeah.
One of their developers had downloaded it, and that developer got promoted to a new role. And, he kept us in mind and carrying us along the way. Right. And so it's been funny. Prefix has been one of those things that is probably one of the best things we ever built, but also gets the least amount of attention and energy and continued innovation. So we're working hard on it now, actually, to release a whole new version. But that's probably my favorite.
Let's talk a little more about Stackify for a second, because this is the innovation that you've spent 8 years at this point. You have put a ton of your own money into it.
Yeah.
Maybe on some days more than you would have liked, right?
Sure.
But you've been all in on the whole concept of it. But that's an innovation it's an innovation to help other people innovate.
Yeah, we help other software developers basically improve their software.
Yeah.
So we want to tell them how to make their software faster, find problems with it, troubleshoot problems.
Where you might where there might be a red flag waving that you didn't notice.
Because the problem with software is the more you change it, the more it breaks, the more there's opportunities to improve it. And so a lot of times it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat in the box, right? You don't really know if the cat's alive or dead. And a lot of times people install Stackify and like they sort of cringe to know like the problems we find with their software.
Well, it even gives you an an application score.
We give them a score.
Yeah, and for people for people like me, that's kind of helpful because, well, for example, I was terrified when we first installed it in GigaBook, and then it gave us an app score of B, and I was like, I can live with that because it's higher than the grades I usually got in school. Now, you can then look at that and say, well, what do I need to do to get to an A?
Yep.
There are a zillion tools out there just in general that can help improve a lot of these things. If you can do it better, faster, cheaper, preferably all of those, you're going to win.
That's one of the key innovations.
You're going to at least be in the race.
One of the key innovations at Stackify, I talk about how we're different, is we integrate several different products together, and we did it for really a different end user. So a lot of our competitors are focused on IT operations and system administrators at large companies, and we're more focused on software developers at kind of small to mid-sized companies. And so how we do things is just a little different. How we show them the data is a little different. It's just similar but different, just tailored.
I think I have one more tip and topic we can touch as we round out this episode of Startup Hustle, which was brought to you by Fullscale.io. Making your innovations potentially
easier, quicker,
more affordable,
faster.
Yeah. Curiosity.
Yeah.
And I know that's a synonym of some of the things we've discussed earlier, but if you realize, I don't know, man, I feel like I'm always poking around at a lot of different things. I oftentimes say I'll try 10 things hoping one works.
Yes.
That's a product of curiosity. They say curiosity killed the cat, but the cat that didn't get killed probably innovated something cool or
that
discovered.
species is still alive. So
You don't-
something about that curiosity.
Right. Now, sure, it did kill the cat in some situations. And then other times, because that cat was actually looking and curious, it found something that it normally would have. Look,
Might be why it survived.
if you're not looking for stuff, you're not going to find it.
Yep.
It's just that simple. I mean, if you're not poking around, if you're not trying to innovate, you probably won't.
Yeah.
If you're not trying to find, encourage, or push innovation at your business or your startup, you probably won't be innovative. I'm not a big person when it comes to promises, but one thing that you can guarantee, and I can promise you, is that things will change.
Right.
And if you're not doing things to innovate, improve, and continue to grow at your business, then you are more likely going out of business than creating something that has a high level of longevity. What are your thoughts there?
You definitely always have to be innovating. That's for sure. Your competition is not going to stop, and they will they'll run right past you if you wait long enough. But at the same time, a lot of these big companies, especially if you sell like B2B enterprise kind of software, a lot of them don't look or feel very innovative,
Well, right. That was my point, is you
Even-
also can't just stay in the state of stasis.
But,
Like you get lazy and
my
you
old
kind of just deal with
company,
it.
Vin Solutions, like if you look, I mean, I haven't been there in like almost 10 years, but if you looked at their product today, it pretty much looks the same. They've done some, innovating on the backside, change different things here and there, but largely if you kind of glanced at it, you'd be like, this hasn't changed in forever. And it looks like an old dog at this point.
One of the things I talk about in my book, $1 Million Bedroom, is that the moment you're successful with something, you've sent up a signal flare, and that people are they're coming for you, man.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to keep innovating and keeping things better. Like, there are a lot of things that send that signal flare up.
Yeah.
And it's not just getting it's not just going public or getting a massive VC investment.
Right.
Sometimes it's just existing.
Yeah.
And if there are people that, we mentioned here that you don't necessarily have to have a fresh idea, do it better.
Yeah.
I got to say, I mean, so much about America and capitalism is the person that originally had the idea didn't end up being the one that made it rock.
Well, and like electric cars is a good example of this, right? Everybody's had this idea, and but like General Motors and Ford and others sell electric cars, but have been highly unsuccessful at it, even today. Even in this economy. But Tesla has
some of that was their refusal to become as knowledgeable as possible.
Yeah, like the
Stubborn.
dealerships, the model, the salespeople, everything aren't pushing it. They're not promoting it. The product's not good enough. But you have somebody like Tesla come by who sells like 1/10 as many cars as Ford and GM,
and they're profitable.
But their car is
they're now
their
profitable.
company is also like worth profoundly more, which the value of their company is absolutely off the charts and insane. And I don't understand why it's so high.
I think part of it is the fact that they're also a battery company.
Right.
And the widespread,
they've created a brand.
Well, the widespread
beyond powerful.
Sure, and the widespread application of their innovation wasn't just limited. So like it started. Okay, so you have a Tesla, and like range is a concern,
right?
So, and that has always been the thing. And when Tesla started making cars, they realized that the current battery technology was either too expensive or it didn't do what they needed to do. So they said, you know what, we need to innovate change.
Right.
This needs to be something we can control, we can get our arms around, and the subsections of that are things like, they have the solar roof panels and the battery that'll stay in your house. And I mean, just the things trickle down across industry and by the way, we say leave a footprint of change. Well, it's a footprint of change that we need due to the carbon footprint of change we've created.
You've got every car manufacturer there is that's 5 to 10 years behind Tesla trying to catch up. And like Porsche's coming out with a new electric car and everybody thinks it's cool and whatever. And then you get closer to manufacturing here and the car's like twice as expensive. It has worse range and no better performance.
So some of that, and
they're in trouble.
And I want to switch to electric. Part of me, and okay, now I'll be honest, part of what made me wait up to this point was the perceived value some of that stuff's more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is changing. Now, when I go to look at electric, I think, man, I'd buy a Tesla. Why? Because they've had enough time to gain knowledge, perfect what they're building.
Experts at this.
They have a ton of it. And then I look at something like you mentioned, Porsche. I'm like, how many electric cars have you made, Porsche? Because I think this thing's going to fall apart.
Well, they're also owned by Volkswagen.
The what?
Porsche is also owned by Volkswagen.
Okay, sure.
So they have some history there, so they can leverage. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, though.
I mean, one of the things
not
too,
trusting.
and still in the electric car range is, there's just laws that are requiring that they're saying, hey, you're not going to run fuel combustion engines at this date.
Tesla makes probably just as much money from selling their like carbon credits and crap than they do selling cars.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, you have companies like Daimler Chrysler and stuff that like in Europe their cars aren't very fuel efficient, and these European countries now are requiring that your fuel economy is certain things, and otherwise you have to buy carbon credits. So somebody like Tesla is making like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They're selling these carbon credits, basically.
That's interesting.
It's really kind of goofy.
I mean, this is once again just one of the many ways. Like, I want to, on the way out, I want to encourage everyone to. I think that. Do you have a final tip? What's your founder's freestyle moment here?
So the other topic we didn't talk about, I'll want to talk about now real fast on the way out. For my founder's freestyle here is understanding who on your team is innovative and can be kind of more the visionary of the team, and realizing
letting them do it.
And you have to realize that about them. But if you're that person, you also have to realize that you can be very disruptive of everybody around you. Like if you've got a new idea every day and you run around to all the managers in your company, and you're like, oh, I had this great idea this morning. We need to do this. And you go to the next person. You need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. All of them are like, dude, I'm trying to get the shit you told me 3 weeks ago still done. Like I don't have time for your shit every day. You walk in my office with a new idea. Like that's difficult. And you got to understand, if you're the idea person, you got to understand that a little bit too. You got to figure out how to marinate on some of those ideas, when to, present some of them and all of that. And then if you're the person that is dealing with that kind of person, you got to kind of know that about their personality too. And some of that I think it's a learning thing. People have to understand how each other are and kind of know, okay, here comes Matt with his dumb ideas today. Okay, I'll appease him and then let him go. And some of it is just learning people's personality and understanding there are people that are wired that way.
You and I are both similar, can do that.
We can be that way. And I've had that problem before with people in my company where I've had people have literally told me like, Matt, like, hey, you keep coming by every day and you tell me this shit, but I don't even have time to deal with it.
I've gotten better with that, and I'm guilty of doing exactly what you just mentioned on a lot of days. I have a book that I carry around with me that I write a lot of stuff down. Yeah. Because I realized that I mentioned earlier feeling, all right, so the great chess masters of the world are thinking 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. Yeah. And now, but the thing is in the reality, that game is on the current move.
You're playing like trench warfare. Like everybody's in the trenches.
It's always on the current move. You're not 6 moves ahead.
Yeah.
And so, I mentioned trying to get better about that. That's one of the things that, I can spit ideas out a lot. And I was talking to another local KC founder about this, and we were both acknowledging that it can be problematic because it can create confusion about what the direction is. What do I take action on? So I've learned to bottle some of that stuff up. I write it down so I don't forget about it. I regularly page through the book and I look at some of the stuff. Sometimes I'm better than others at writing it down. I also have like a really basic to-do list that's on my laptop and connected to and my phone and a couple different things. And like sometimes I'll just like, if I have a decent idea, I'll just put it on a to-do list, and that's so I remember it later. I think that in closing, I think that the advice that I gave earlier is really important. And it's, if you feel inspired and you're having moments of clarity, I think you need to try to do anything and everything you can to ride that moment until that horse won't ride anymore. And I say that because I look back at my own history, and the thing, like, inspiration is difficult to bottle and get out in small, serving sizes.
Yep. You need to know when you're working on your masterpiece and stay on it.
Right. And with that, you can, all right. So my wife, Jill, knows that if I were to say that, and I don't pull this card out a whole lot, but if I say, hey, I'm in the zone on something and I need you to cover me here.
Yep.
And then I always joke, I mentioned that I need to go into castaway mode.
Yeah.
And that's like, I'm going to go lock myself away. I'm going to put myself on the island, and I will get off of that island when I'm either rescued or I find my way off.
Wilson.
And, yeah. Well, Tom Hanks and Wilson innovated a raft and they got out of the way.
Yeah.
And, that took a little time, and there was some failure along the way, some painful failure. So, but like I said, when you find that moment of inspiration, hang on to it. And I want to compliment something that you said earlier in your business. If you have people that are innovative and creative, I think that it's important to clear the space for them to do so.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's someone's strength. But if you bog that person down with, you mentioned all the other crap earlier that moves you too far away from that mental space, and then you're not there. Like, get that person in the space that they need to be. And that's different for everyone.
And it can be so frustrating to me because like I can think 5 steps ahead. And it's so frustrating because I'm like, guys, come on. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Let's get this shit done. Let's go.
Hurry up.
I got 4 more things we need to do.
Why aren't you done with that 2 years of work that we haven't had 2 years of work to complete?
Yeah.
Now, speaking of which, I'm going to get back to work.
Yeah, we got to get some work done.
Yeah. See you next time.